The longest river within British Columbia, Canada, rising from the Fraser Pass near Broylock Mountain and the Rocky Mountains and flowing for 1,375 kilometers, that's 854 miles, into the Strait of Georgia, just south of the city of Vancouver. The river's annual discharge at its mouth is about 112 kilometers or 27.3 millimeters. Overall, the river was named after Simon Fraser, who led an expedition in 1808 on behalf of the Northwest Company from the site of the present day called Prince George, almost a month of the river. The river's name is Upper Hippolyte, named Stolo. Stolo is the Indian band, often seen by Stolo as being adopted by the people choosing their name in the lower mainland of the collective name. The river's name is in Daikak. Daikak language is another group of the intellectual of what we call the native Indian group. The Fraser drains 320,000 square meters or 85,000 miles. Its sources are Dripping Spring, or the Fraser Pass of the Canadian Rockies near the border of Alberta. The Canadian Rockies, near the part of Alberta, is one that we view with flows north of the Yellowhead Highway, to the west of Mount Robson, to the river's mountain trench, and the Robson Valley near Valemount. After running northwest past 34 degrees north, it makes a sharp turn to the south in Jacom, meeting the Nechako River in the city of Prince George, that continues south, progressively cutting deeper into the Fraser Plateau to form the Fraser Canyon from roughly the confines of the Chilcotin River near Williams Lake. It is joined by a bridge and Seton River at the town of Lillooet, then by the Thompson River at Lytton, where it proceeds south until it is approximately 64 meters or 40 miles north of the 49th parallel, which is the Canada border to the United States. The mountains on the west and the Cascade Range on its east is Hell's Gate, located immediately downstream to the town of Boston Bar. It is a famous portion of the canyon where the walls nearly dramatically forced the entire volume of the river through a gap merely 35 meters. An aerial transway takes place to visitors over the river. Hell's Gate is visible from the Trans-Canada Highway about 1.2 miles south of the transway. The Sun Fraser is one which forced its portage. The gorge has its trip through the canyon on June 1808. At Yale, at the head of the navigation of the river, the canyon opens up and the river widens, though without much misalignment in the lowland, until Hope, where the river then turns west and southwest into the Fraser Valley, a lush lowland valley, and runs past Chilliwack and the confluence of Harrison and the Sumas rivers, bending southwest at Abbotsford and Mission. The Fraser then flows past Maple Ridge, Pitt Meadows, Port Coquitlam, and North Surrey. It turns southwest again, just east of New Westminster, where it splits into the North Arm, which is the southern boundary of the city of Vancouver, and the Southern Arm, which divides the city of Richmond from the city of Delta to the south. Richmond is on the largest island in the Fraser, the Lulu Island, and also the Sea Island, which is the location of Vancouver's International Airport, where the middle arm branches off to the south, where the north arm is the far eastern part of the Lulu Islands named Queensborough, and is part of the city of New Westminster. Also in the lowermost Fraser, among other smaller items, the Annacis Island is important industrial and port area, which ties into the southeastern part of the province, named Markstrom, the Markstrom Island, Matsqui Island, Nickelman Island, and the Seabird Island. Other islands lie on the other side of the estuary, notably West Ham Island, a wildfowl preserve, and Iona Island, and the location of the middle sewage plant for the city of Vancouver. After 100 kilometers, or about 60 miles rather, the Fraser forms a delta where it empties into the Strait of Georgia between the mainland and Vancouver Island. The land south of the city of Vancouver includes the city of Richmond and Delta, sit on the flat flood plains. The island of the Delta includes the Iolan Island, the Lulu Islands, Annacis Island, and a number of smaller islands. While the vast majority of the rivers, the similar areas to that of the Columbia George River of the eastern part of Portland, Oregon. The Fraser exploits a topographical and from the beginning of the Tropic Mountains ranges it separately from a continental climb, and that is the coast. When the Arctic high-pressure area moves into the British Columbia interior and relatively low-pressure area builds over the general Puget Sound and Strait of Georgia region, the cold Arctic air accelerates southwest through the Fraser Canyon. These overflow winds can gust up to 97 to 129 kilometers per hour and leave the times exceeded 160 kilometers per hour. Such winds frequently reach Bellingham and the San Juan Islands, gaining strength over the open water in the Strait of Juan de Fuca. The estuary of the river's mouth is the hemispheric importance of the Western Hemisphere Shorebird Reserve. The Water Survey of Canada currently operates 17-gauge stations that measures discharge and water levels along the majority of the mainstream from the Red Pass just downstream at Moose Lake in the Mount Robson Provincial Park to Steveston in Vancouver at the river mouth, with an average flow of the mouth at 3,000.475 cubic meters per second. Overall, the Fraser River is the largest river by discharge flowing into the Pacific southbound of Canada and the fifth largest in the country. The average flow is highly seasonal. Summer discharge rates can be sometimes larger than the flow of the river during the winter. The Fraser's highest recorded flood is in June 1894. It estimated to have been 17,000 cubic meters per second of water. It accumulated using high water marks known from the hydrometric station at Hope and various statistical stations. In 1948, the River Board adopted an estimate of a 1894 flood. It remains as one of the highest theories. Then on June 14, 1792, the Spanish explorers Dicción, Alcón, Galeano, and Valdez entered the anchored area of the north arm of the Fraser River, becoming the first Europeans to find and enter it. The existence of the river, but not its location, had been disordered during 1791 voyage by Valdez. The upper reaches of the Fraser were first explored by Sir Alexander Mackenzie in 1793 and fully traced by Simon Fraser in 1808, who confirmed that it was the connector with the Columbia River. The lower Fraser was revisited in 1824 when the Hudson Bay Company sent a crew across Puget Sound from its Fort George southern post on the Columbia River. The expedition was led by James McMillan. The Fraser was reached via the Nickamek River and the Salmon River, rechargeable after a portage. Finally, the tribes met earlier and the Simon Fraser crew were reacquainted with a trading post with agricultural potential was to be located. But in 1827, a crew was sent back via the mouth of the Fraser to build an operational and original Fort Langley. McMillan was also led the understanding trading post, originally located where soon became the first ever mixed ancestry or agricultural settlement of southern British Columbia on the Fraser called Stolo River. In 1828, George Simpson visited the river mainly to examine Fort Langley and to determine whether it would be suitable for the Hudson Bay Company's main Pacific depot. Simpson had believed the Fraser River might be navigable throughout its length, even though Simon Fraser had described it as non-navigable. Simpson journeyed down the river and through the Fraser Canyon and afterwards wrote, "I should consider the passage down to be certain death. In 9 attempts, 1 out of 10, I shall therefore no longer talk about it, as it is a navigable stream." His trip down the river convinced him that Fort Langley could not replace Fort Vancouver as company, mainly being a depot of the Pacific coast. Much of British Columbia's history has been bound by the Fraser River, partly because it was a essential main route to the interior and the lower court. The force of overall the coast after the area of the landslides had the 49th parallel between that and the lower mainland, and the loss of the south of mainland leading into Portland, Oregon, became the Treaty of 1846. It was the site of its first recorded settlements of Aboriginal people.